All right, friends, today we're going to be talking about one of the most powerful tools that we are going to arm you with, and that's called the Support Challenge Matrix. This is an extremely powerful tool because in many ways, I think it's one of the easiest to kind of wrap your head around immediately and immediately begin to start using the language of this tool. By the end of this session, my hope for you is that you're actually going to walk away with some practical ideas of how you can liberate and empower your team better today. And so here's how this tool works. If you can see the axis, one axis is support and one axis is challenge. Those are the first two words here that we need to define. Support is everything that you need to do your job really well, whether that's your job at work or as a student athlete, the type of support that you need. It can be encouragement. It could be specific vocal feedback from a coach. Hey, you're doing this really well. I just want you to know. It can be just a welcoming hug. It can be a high five in the middle of the game, or when you grab someone's shoulder just to let them know that you're there, or when you look at a teammate and you kind of give them one of these to say, hey, let's respond. I see you. We're doing this. All of those are examples of support. You taking the time, or a leader taking the time to make sure that you know or that your teammate knows you belong here, you're welcomed here, we're glad you're here. All of that is support. And then on the other axis, you have challenge. Challenge is really, when it comes to feedback, would be critical feedback. Hey, I need you to do this better. Or, hey, you're not meeting the standard that we set, right? And that could be communicated in a lot of different ways as well. Again, it can be vocal. We communicate challenge to each other all of the time, non-verbally. I've seen many practices where challenge is communicated ineffectively, I would say, with an eye roll, or I start to say my challenge to a teammate, but I turn this way and kind of yell it instead to the corner instead of addressing it in an effective way. But it can also be very direct, very clear, and very helpful to my teammates when I'm able to say, hey, we need you to do this a little bit better. Hey, we need you to get on the same page. When we calibrate support and challenge, that creates different cultures. And the way to think about culture here within the context of this tool, I think, is what does it feel like to be on your team? Does it feel like you are being empowered, that you have opportunity, or does it feel like you're being dominated? Is it a culture of fear, manipulation, or protector? We've all been on teams that have felt like each of these. And we're going to talk about what those different cultures are like kind of one by one. First, let's talk about a culture of liberator. We want to calibrate both high support and high challenge. We want to be bringing high challenge so that people are growing, they're getting better, they're improving, they know exactly where they stand, but also high support. People feel like they belong, and that's really what we want to aim for. A culture that is high challenge, low support, or even no support is what we call a dominator culture, and that's a culture of fear and manipulation. And here's the idea. Most oftentimes in a dominator culture, if you're being dominated by a teammate or a leader, you're going to do what they say or what they're asking of you, but not because you want to, but because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't, right? So that's extreme challenge. All you hear all the time is what you could be doing better, how you can improve, but you don't ever hear what you're doing well, or you don't hear all of the ways that you're bringing good to your team. But then on the opposite side of that, you have a high support, low challenge culture. That's kind of like the idea of the cliche we use is, right, the player's coach, right? They're kind of rah, they'll get you going, they'll get you fired up, but really they're kind of afraid to directly confront people or to kind of call people out. And so it creates this protector culture of entitlement, right? People kind of feel like they're really better than they are because they're not being challenged and they're not growing. So they don't have a good sense of where they stand amongst other people. But it's also mistrust, because then when the challenge does come in, you're kind of like, hey, hang on a second, where did that come from? That's usually not here, right? So you're not sure when the challenge is coming because it's so rare. And then also it tends to feel way more subjective, and like it's kind of almost like people picking favorites of who they like to challenge and who they don't, because it's not consistent enough. And then you have the abdicator culture, which really within the context of teams might come into play with kind of maybe some of the people who are on the end of the bench. Maybe they don't get a lot of playing time or they're playing less, or maybe they're in the middle of an injury or rehab. And so they feel like, you know what, they're kind of lose their place. They don't really know their place on the team. They're not being challenged because they're not in practice every day or they're not in the games as much as other players. So they kind of tend to become more apathetic and have low expectations of themselves. Our goal with this tool and your goal with this tool is for every single member of your team to be in the liberator quadrant, because that's when your team's going to be at its best. That's when your team's going to grow because there's high challenge, but people are also going to feel like they belong and they're going to want to be there because it is high support. And so all of us, one last thing to note about this tool is all of us tend to lean one way or the other. What I mean by that is all of us in our nature tend to lean more towards being challengers or being more of supporters. And because of that, we tend to more dominate our teammates or protect our teammates. I want to tell you a story. I used to have a captain on one of my teams who was always right. In fact, they were a true like generational player. They were right more than I was, right? They were the type of player when something was going on in a game, I would pull them aside and say, hey, you tell me what's going on. You tell me the solution because you're going to know best. But what they would do is they were an extreme challenge voice. They loved being challenged. They craved challenge from their coaches and from their teammates. And that they took that as a sign that their teammates and their coaches cared about them. And so what do you think they were ready to give out to everybody else? That player was ready to give out challenge all the time, constant challenge. We could do this better. Hey, you got to do this. And what happened is their teammates, because their teammates were not the same way as them, started to completely tune this captain out. And so I had to have a conversation with that player to say, hey, look, when you speak and you speak to your teammates, you're almost always right. But the thing is, because of the way that you challenge them, no one ever hears you. So instead of it being effective challenge and helping us get better as a team, it's actually hurting our team because you're dominating everybody. Everybody's coming afraid of you, and it's not fun to be on a team with someone like that. So we had to challenge that player to move from domination. She had a tendency to dominate more towards liberation by being intentional about how she supported her teammates. And it was amazing. You might be more of a supportive voice. It's much easier for you to support. It's harder for you to bring challenge to other people. It feels a little bit uncomfortable. It's not in your nature. You're kind of a people pleaser. So you might tend to be a little bit more passive aggressive, and you might tend to be more protector. You're going to have to be intentional with how you challenge, and you challenge effectively and challenge well. So all of us have some room to grow, to be intentional, to move towards liberation. This tool can serve as a mirror, as an opportunity for you to see, okay, where do I stand on this tool and what do I need to do to move towards liberation? One little tip is the last thing I'd like to say is this. One thing I think every team can do to start to use this language is when you're going to speak to someone, whether it's in a practice or a game, just say what you're going to do first. Instead of just saying, good job, teammate, or hey, you did great, or hey, I think we need to do this better. But first, before you say whatever type of feedback you're going to give, say, I want to support you real quick, or I want to challenge you real quick, and watch how much it clarifies your team's communication of the type of feedback and how much more likely your team is to move to liberation. Thanks, guys. See you next time.